And quit moving around, will you? Because you're starting to make me dizzy. I'll just tell her in my own way. Molly, you in danger, girl.
A movie about pottery, ghosts, and emotional pain that was never fully healed somehow became the biggest thing on the planet. In 1990, Ghost floated into theaters from Paramount Pictures, directed by Jerry Zucker, and it starred Patrick Swayze at peak vulnerability, Demi Moore at peak emotional precision, Whoopi Goldberg stealing every moment she appeared in, and Tony Goldwyn playing a villain so believable that waitresses refused to serve him for years. It became the highest-grossing film of 1990. It won Whoopi an Oscar, making her the first black woman to win that award in more than 50 years. It brought back a 35-year-old love song, and it permanently connected wet clay with romance in our shared imagination. This was not just a movie, it was like changing the way people felt emotionally. And today, we are counting down 15 strange and wild facts about Ghost. From casting choices that almost happened and auditions that went wrong, to demon sounds that can still scare you in your nightmares, stay until number 15 because that one is about the audition that almost never happened and the real grief that made it unforgettable. Now, before we jump in, hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell. It helps YouTube show this video to more retro movie fans just like you. Now let's get started with number 1. Bruce Willis passed on playing dead, then ended up doing it anyway. In 1990, Hollywood had a romantic fantasy. Bruce Willis and Demi Moore, who were married in real life, starring together in a supernatural love story. Studios were practically drooling over the idea, but Bruce wanted to step away even before the table read. His problem was that the character was dead. Willis was reportedly unsure about the whole concept. How does a movie even work when your main character spends most of the runtime as a ghost? No fistfights, no explosions.
Yippee-ki-yay.
Just floating around and watching things happen. And in 1990, Bruce Willis was very focused on building the John McClane brand, a smart-talking tough guy, not a sad ghost boyfriend, so he strongly passed on the role. That decision cleared the way for Patrick Swayze, who brought something Willis probably never would have brought: vulnerability without weakness. Where Bruce might have played the role in a more cynical way, Swayze played it with tenderness. His chemistry with Demi Moore became the real emotional heart of the film. But here is the interesting part. 9 years later, Bruce Willis starred in The Sixth Sense, playing a man who, spoiler alert, was actually dead the whole time. The movie made more than $670 million worldwide and became a huge cultural phenomenon. It turned out audiences were completely happy to follow a ghost if the story was good. Willis later said he regretted turning down Ghost, explaining that he did not understand what the film could become at the time, which is basically Hollywood language for "I left about $100 million on the table and my wife kept the receipt." In the end, everyone still won. But somewhere in another universe, there is a version of Ghost starring Bruce Willis, and it is probably a lot more sarcastic and has a lot less crying.
Number 2. Those demons were literally screaming babies, and now you cannot unhear it. The shadow demons in Ghost have very little screen time, but that sound moved into your brain rent-free and never left. Sound designer Walter Murch had a strange problem to solve. He did not want a normal monster roar. He wanted the audio version of pure damnation, something that would skip your brain completely and hit your nervous system hard. His solution was the sound of crying babies. Murch took those recordings and changed them so they felt wrong. He slowed them down a lot, lowered the pitch until those high baby cries became deep, rough moans, and then he played them backwards. Here is why that works. Humans naturally react to the sound of a baby crying, but when that sound is reversed and distorted, it becomes very confusing. You cannot recognize it, and you cannot explain it logically. All you feel is fear, and you do not know why. You could cover your eyes when the shadows burst through the walls, but it did not matter. The sound still reached you. You did not need to see hell, you could hear it coming. By turning something innocent into something dangerous, Murch created one of the most disturbing audio moments in 1990 cinema in Ghost. Critics and fans have often said that the sound design is a big reason why the movie still feels creepy, even after the images fade from memory. Number 3. The scariest thing in Ghost was a very tired man on public transit. The shadow demons got all the nightmares. But let's be honest, Vincent Schiavelli lurking in a subway station is the image that really followed you home. That face was thin and hollow-eyed, looking like he had not slept since the Dwight D. Eisenhower administration. Schiavelli's subway ghost did not play the role as evil. He played it as tragic, a spirit so exhausted by his own existence that anger was all he had left. When Sam first meets him, the ghost is territorial and aggressive. But then something changes. This hostile stranger becomes an unexpected teacher, showing Sam how to interact with the physical world, how to push, focus, and make the living feel his presence. Without that meeting, Sam has no way to protect Molly and no way to fight back. The subway ghost does not just scare us, he unlocks the entire third act of the film.
But here is the gut punch hiding in plain sight. This ghost is not a villain, he's a warning. A spirit who never moved on, stuck replaying the same anger in the same tunnels forever. He shows Sam and us what happens when you cannot let go. For many fans, that subway encounter is still one of the eeriest scenes in Ghost.
Number 4. The pottery scene was not an accident, even though everyone thinks it was. Every Gen Xer knows the pottery scene. Unchained melody playing,
Swayze's hands over Moore's, clay spinning, hearts melting, and that moment when the pot collapses and everything gets messy and real, that was not an accident. Hollywood lied to you. For decades, people have said the clay collapsed by surprise, that Swayze and Moore improvised, Zucker kept the cameras rolling, and movie magic just happened. It's a perfect Hollywood story, but it's not true. The collapse was planned, written into the script, and rehearsed. Zucker and the filmmakers wanted that moment where perfection fails, where the shape buckles and the scene shifts from control to connection. They shot multiple takes, not just one lucky accident. But here's what is true. Moore actually learned pottery. She trained for weeks before filming so the camera could stay close, really close, without breaking the magic. Centering clay on a spinning wheel is extremely hard. If you mess up, the whole thing wobbles and falls apart. She practiced until her hands looked like they belonged there. That meant no obvious hand doubles, no constant cuts. The camera could move smoothly from her face to her hands and back, showing the intimacy completely. And the accident? It was made to do exactly what it did. Make the characters stop performing and start reacting. The laughter, the mess, the playfulness, none of it was chaos. It was carefully planned chaos, which actually makes it more impressive, not less. Number 5. Ditto had no business being that romantic. Quick, name the most romantic line in movie history. You complete me. As you wish. How about Ditto?
Ditto.
Somehow, Ghost turned it into an emotional wrecking ball, and the guy who wrote it wasn't sure about it at first. Screenwriter Bruce Joel Rubin has talked about how hard it is in Hollywood not to go big in the final act. When your soulmate is about to cross into the great beyond, the instinct is to write a speech, something grand, memorable, and something that could sell greeting cards. Ditto felt like a cop-out at first, too small, too casual, like the movie was shrugging at its own love story. But then the team figured out what made it actually perfect. Sam Wheat wasn't a feelings guy. He was closed off, emotionally armored in that very specific late 80s way. The man worked in finance. Saying "I love you" out loud probably made him uncomfortable. So Ditto wasn't laziness, it was him, his shorthand, his way of saying everything without actually saying anything. And that tiny word became the movie's secret weapon. By making Ditto Sam's signature word early on, the film planted a verbal fingerprint. Later, when Molly hears that word coming through Oda Mae Brown's mouth, she doesn't need DNA evidence. She knows.
That was Ditto. Ditto.
No one else on Earth would say it that way. Then comes the knockout punch. At the very end, Sam finally says the full words, "I love you." And Molly, broken, grieving, but finally at peace, answers with Ditto.
Ditto.
The roles reverse. She has learned his language. She understands him completely, and she is ready to let him go. If that doesn't break you, check your freaking pulse, man. Number 6. Patrick Swayze fought for Whoopi Goldberg and changed the movie forever. Swayze was supposed to be the pretty face, show up, look soulful, haunt romantically. Nobody asked him to have opinions about casting, but he had them anyway. When it came to Oda Mae Brown, the studio hesitated. Goldberg wasn't the safe, obvious choice for a big supernatural romance. In 1990, she was a respected stand-up and stage star, but Hollywood didn't really know what to do with her in blockbuster movies. She wasn't on the studio's radar. Swayze disagreed loudly. Multiple people involved with the film have said he personally pushed for Goldberg, believing she was the only one who could make Oda Mae feel real instead of cartoonish. He had seen her work and loved her grounded cynicism, the kind of dry, skeptical energy that can make a scam artist turn into a real psychic without tipping into parody. And this was Patrick Swayze, who had just come off Dirty Dancing. When he spoke, people listened. Eventually, the studio did too. They flew Goldberg out, and that chemistry was instant.
Molly, you in danger, girl.
That moment exists because Patrick Swayze knew what this movie needed before the executives did.
Number 7. A 35-year-old song became the hottest track of 1990 thanks to Clay. Before Ghost, Unchained Melody was a beloved classic, known to older generations from oldie radio stations and slow dances at weddings. It was safe, comfortable, and not exactly topping the charts. Then a properly weird thing started happening, and suddenly that old song found new life in a way few tracks ever do. The genius wasn't just picking the right song, it was the sync. That low, haunting bass starts just as the wheel begins to turn. The guitar hums like clay breathing under Demi Moore's hands. As the pot rises, so does the music. I need your love. And when Bobby Hatfield hits that impossible note, I need your love, I'm not even gonna try it here. The movie doesn't just show you romance, it wires it directly into your nervous system. The reaction was immediate. After Ghost came out, the 1965 Righteous Brothers recording climbed back into the Billboard Hot 100, reaching number 13, while a newly recorded 1990 version also hit the top 20 at number 19. That made them the first act ever to have two versions of the same song in the Billboard Hot 100 Top 20 at the same time. And overnight, it became the ultimate Gen X karaoke trap. Everyone thought they could hit those notes. Almost no one could. Thousands of bar patrons suffered. It was a terrible time. Unchained Melody has over 1,500 recorded versions by more than 670 artists worldwide. But if you lived through 1990, only one version matters. The one that makes you think you should probably own a pottery wheel. Number 8. That penny scene hit harder than $1 billion CGI spectacle. These days, if a superhero needs to move an object with their mind, some guy in a cubicle clicks a mouse and the computer does it. In 1990, they had to get creative. When Sam needs to prove to Molly that he's really there, that he's not just her grief playing tricks on her mind, he makes a penny float up the door. That wasn't some slick digital effect. Ghost was made before modern CGI took over Hollywood. Most effects were done in camera or with optical composites, which meant everything had to feel grounded, physical, and real. And that's exactly why it works. On screen, the penny rises slowly, trembling, struggling. It's not a magic trick, it's effort. In the world of Ghost, moving a small piece of copper isn't a party trick, it's a Herculean act of will. You feel Sam pushing against the laws of physics just to reach the woman he loves. And because it's a real penny on a real door in a real New York apartment, your brain doesn't question it. Molly believes it, and so do you. That's what Gen X remembers most. One of the most emotionally devastating scenes of our childhood wasn't rendered on a server farm. It was simple, small, and earned, powered by the radical idea that love could still move something even from the other side. Okay, we're taking a quick break because we're about halfway through this countdown, and if Ghost emotionally wrecked you in 1990, or you're just now realizing why it did, do us a favor, hit like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. That way you won't miss the next time we dig up a movie you thought you remembered and prove you absolutely didn't. Alright, now let's get back to the emotional damage with Number 9. The spoof king who made America ugly cry. Before Ghost, Jerry Zucker's biggest dramatic moment was Leslie Nielsen fighting a runaway hot dog, not exactly Oscar material. Zucker was one-third of the legendary Swayze trio, the maniacs behind Airplane and The Naked Gun. These guys put Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in a cockpit and had Leslie Nielsen disarming bombs while delivering deadpan one-liners. Their whole career was built on mocking sincerity. So when Zucker signed on to direct a romantic supernatural thriller about love, loss, and the afterlife, Hollywood collectively spit out its coffee. Paramount executives were quietly terrified. The script was a tonal tightrope. It was part thriller, part love story, and part meditation on death, and their new director's instinct was to look for the joke. Even Zucker had his doubts. He was suspicious of Patrick Swayze at first. He was too handsome, too leading man, too obvious, a cliché, not a character. But then Zucker had an epiphany that changed everything. Comedy and drama run on the same clock. The pause before a laugh is the same pause before a tear. The timing that made Airplane land was the same timing that could make audiences sob into their popcorn. So he played it completely straight. No winks, no irony, just raw emotion, calibrated with the same precision he once used for slapstick. The result is a movie so sincere it made the whole planet cry. Directed by a guy famous for rubber chickens and fart jokes. Turns out, if you can make people laugh, you already know exactly where the heart is.
Number 10. Crocodile Dundee almost haunted Demi Moore. Picture the Pottery scene. Moore at the wheel, unchained melodies swelling, and behind her, Paul Hogan cracking jokes about the afterlife while clay splattered everywhere. That almost happened. When Ghost was making the rounds in Hollywood, studios weren't quite sure what to do with it. The script blended romance, thriller, and supernatural drama in ways that made executives nervous. Some imagined a more comedic take, and naturally their first instinct was to cast the guy who fought crocodiles with a knife and charmed his way through New York. Hogan was riding a massive wave in the late 80s. He was charming, rugged, always winking at the camera. Studio logic said, play up the laughs, tone down the tears, and who better to deliver supernatural charm than the bloke who once told muggers, "That's not a knife." Now, really sit with that for a second. Instead of Swayze's aching vulnerability, you'd get Aussie swagger. Instead of quiet heartbreak, you'd be waiting for the punchline. Sam Wheat wouldn't be tragically reaching for his lost love. He'd be making ghost jokes and probably calling Whoopi Goldberg's character Might. Thankfully, Hogan said no. He felt the role's emotional depth didn't match his comedic persona, so he stuck with lighter adventures and left the weeping to someone else. Number 11. Demi Moore's restraint was the secret weapon that nobody saw coming. In the late 80s, movie grief had one setting: maximum volume. Shaking, sobbing, mascara running down faces like a Tim Burton nightmare. If you weren't ugly crying, were you even sad? Moore walked into Ghost and threw that entire playbook in the trash. Director Jerry Zucker was navigating tricky territory, balancing supernatural thrills, romantic drama, and Whoopi Goldberg's comedy. He needed an emotional anchor, someone who could show devastating grief without tipping the movie into over-the-top drama. Moore delivered something critics and co-stars would praise for decades: restraint. She didn't wail, she didn't collapse. She played Molly's heartbreak with a stillness that felt almost uncomfortable, like eavesdropping on someone's worst moment. That subtlety let Zucker hold the camera on her longer than usual. No cutaways, no distractions, just quiet devastation filling the frame. If Moore had gone big, the whole balancing act would have collapsed. Instead, her understated performance grounded every scene she touched. The final shot proves it. As Sam fades into the light, the camera stays locked on Molly's face. No theatrics, just a woman watching the love of her life disappear forever. Number 12. Patrick Swayze wasn't allowed to breathe. Literally. Being a ghost looks romantic on screen, but behind the scenes, it meant standing in a meat locker trying not to shiver while a director obsessed over your breathing. Jerry Zucker insisted that ghosts appear completely ethereal. No foggy exhales, no warmth, no signs of life. If audiences ever saw Swayze breathe, the whole illusion would break. Small problem. They were filming in New York during winter with human actors who insisted on having working lungs. So the crew declared war on physics. They cranked the AC until the sets felt like industrial freezers. Crew members waddled around in parkas while Swayze stood there in a thin shirt trying to look ethereal instead of hypothermic. And even with all that, some breath still snuck through. In 1990, you couldn't just click remove breath in post. Every visible puff had to be painstakingly erased frame by frame. The process was tedious and expensive.
But Zucker knew his audience. One visible breath in the subway scene, and suddenly Sam Wheat isn't a tragic ghost, he's just a cold guy standing weird. And here's the beautiful irony. They went through all that effort to make sure Swayze never looked like he was breathing, and then the pottery scene became the most breathless moment in the entire film. Sometimes the universe writes its own punchlines.
Number 13. Tony Goldwyn played the villain so well that waitresses refused to serve him. Carl Brunner wasn't your standard movie bad guy. There was no mask, no cackling. He was something far worse, your best friend, your business partner. That kind of betrayal doesn't wash off. And apparently, neither did Goldwyn's face. After Ghost became a phenomenon, Goldwyn discovered something unsettling. In interviews over the years, he's described how strangers treated him like Carl Brunner hadn't stayed on screen. Restaurant servers would glare, service would slow, and in one story he's told repeatedly, a waitress flat out refused to take his order because of what his character did to Patrick Swayze. Here's why it hit so hard. Carl was the leftover nightmare of the greed is good decade, the clean-cut corporate climber who smiled while stabbing you in the back. He wasn't loud or flashy, he was sweaty, desperate, and fake sincere. And because Goldwyn looked safe and approachable, the betrayal felt personal. Goldwyn eventually broke the curse, most famously as the romantic, complicated President Fitz on Scandal. But for a whole generation, he'll always be the guy who betrayed Sam Wheat. And if strangers were still giving him the cold shoulder years later, that's not a complaint, it's the highest compliment an actor can get. Number 14. Whoopi Goldberg's Oscar win was 50 years in the making. When her name was called at the 1991 Oscars, people didn't just clap, they exhaled, like a moment the industry hadn't seen since 1939. And that's not an exaggeration, that's math. The last black woman to win an acting Oscar was Hattie McDaniel for Gone with the Wind, and then nothing. 51 years of silence, half a century of almosts and not quites. So when Whoopi took that stage for Ghost, it wasn't just a moment, it was a finally. Here's what makes it even more remarkable. She did it playing a character who could have been completely disposable. Just reading the script, Oda Mae Brown reads like comic relief, the wacky sidekick, the person who cracks jokes while the pretty leads do the heavy emotional work. In lesser hands, she's a one-note punchline who exits stage left and gets forgotten. Whoopi turned her into the movie's oxygen supply. Ghost is heavy. Murder, grief, betrayal, literal shadow demons dragging screaming souls to hell. Without Oda Mae's timing, audiences would have drowned in it. She gave us permission to breathe, to laugh just enough that when the gut punches came, they landed like freight trains. But the real magic was that she knew when to stop being funny. That scene when Sam temporarily inhabits Oda Mae's body to dance with Molly one last time, she doesn't play it for laughs. Watch her eyes. Her posture changes. Her whole energy softens. She lets Sam's longing live behind her face. In that moment, Oda Mae stops being comic relief and becomes the emotional pivot of the entire film. That's a masterclass, and the impact was undeniable. Oda Mae wasn't the love story, but she's the reason the love story worked.
Number 15. Patrick Swayze won the role by falling apart and never stopping. The most important audition almost never happened because Jerry Zucker wasn't convinced about Swayze. He was fresh off Roadhouse and Dirty Dancing, so Swayze had a reputation. He was an action star, a heartthrob, the guy who could throw a punch and look good doing it. Zucker was making a supernatural love story. He wanted someone soft, soulful, someone who could carry vulnerability, not just choreography. When Swayze's name came up, Zucker was skeptical. But Swayze was drawn to the story's heart, the love and loss at its center. He asked to read for the part, and when Zucker finally let him, he chose the most emotionally powerful scenes in the script. The room reacted, people were moved, and by the time Swayze finished, Zucker knew he had been wrong. Swayze got the role, but the emotional weight didn't stop at the audition. Behind the scenes, filming Ghost stirred up feelings Swayze hadn't expected. In interviews, he later said that seeing a plaster dummy used to represent his on-screen body took him back to the shock of his father's funeral in 1982. The grief he thought he'd processed came rushing back, and that unresolved pain bled into his performance. That's why Sam Wheat doesn't feel like a movie ghost. He feels heavy, like a soul struggling to let go.
The longing in Swayze's eyes during those final scenes wasn't made up for the camera. It came from somewhere real. When Sam says goodbye to Molly,
The love inside, take it with you.
There's a weight to that goes beyond the script. Swayze wasn't just playing a character learning to move on. He was working through something himself. This is why Ghost still hits differently. And there you have it, 15 weird facts about Ghost. A comedy director who made America sob, a tough guy who taught us vulnerability, a supporting character who held the movie together and made Oscar history doing it. 35 years later, the effects still work, the music still wrecks us, and that final goodbye still lands like a freight train to the chest. So which fact surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Until next time.